Hey, and welcome back for another episode. Today I'm going to be talking about induction of labor. Before we jump in, I wanted to let you know about a new resource I created for fourth-year med students that just matched into OBGYN and are about to start residency this July. It's called the OBGYN Residency Starter Pack, a 5-step guide for incoming interns, and it's designed to help you feel more prepared and less overwhelmed as you get ready for residency day 1. Whether you're wondering what to review or what some of the best resources are to help you prepare, this guide will walk you through 5 essential steps to help you hit the ground running. It's totally free, and you can download it at subscribepage.io/OB intern guide or through the show notes linked to this episode. Now that we've covered that, let's dive in. Induction of labor is the process of stimulating uterine contractions before the spontaneous onset of labor. We do this when the benefits of delivery outweigh the risks of remaining pregnant. There are many indications for labor induction, and I would encourage you to review the ACOG Practice Bulletin 831, medically indicated late preterm and early term deliveries, to learn more. The link to that is in the show notes as well. The end goal of labor induction is vaginal delivery. So how do we get there? For learning purposes, you can split the induction period into 2 phases. Phase 1 is the cervical ripening phase, and phase 2 is the actual induction phase. So phase 1 is all about helping the cervix to become soft, thin, just a little bit dilated, and overall ready to accommodate the powerful contractions that come in phase 2. We call this process cervical ripening, and the way we determine how ripe or favorable the cervix is by utilizing the Bishop scoring system. This system essentially assigns numeric values to each component of the cervical exam, being dilation, effacement, station, position, and consistency. Ironically, there's actually no universally accepted definition of a favorable or unfavorable cervix. Some randomized controlled trials define favorable by a score of 6 and some by a score of 8, so it's kind of varied. For the purpose of this episode, all you need to take away is that the goal of cervical ripening is to get the cervix to a Bishop score somewhere between 6 and 8 before initiating phase 2. And this is because cervical ripening before induction reduces the rate of failed induction and shortens the induction to delivery time. So, we're in phase 1. How do we ripen the cervix? We have medical methods and mechanical methods. The medical options include misoprostol, a synthetic prostaglandin E1, which comes as a pill that can be taken orally, sublingually, or placed vaginally. We also have dinoprostone, a synthetic prostaglandin E2, and this comes as a vaginal insert or gel. The common brand name for misoprostol in the United States is Cytotec, and the vaginal insert of dinoprostone is Cervidil. For our mechanical methods, we have single or double balloon catheters, such as the Foley balloon or Cook catheter. So these are tubes that are inserted through the cervical canal into the uterus, where a balloon is then inflated on the uterine side alone, or if it's a double balloon, then there will be a vaginal balloon as well that sort of sandwiches the cervix between the 2 balloons. Because the balloon catheter does have to be inserted through the cervical canal into the uterus, patients will have to be at least fingertip to 1 centimeter dilated in order to place them. Other methods include the osmotic or hygroscopic dilators, such as laminaria or Dilapan. And these are inserted into the cervical canal, and depending on their mechanism, essentially start to enlarge within the canal over time. And as they do so, the cervix dilates to accommodate their increasing size. We also have the option of extra amniotic saline infusion, and this is where a catheter is inserted through the cervix into the space between the uterine wall and fetal membranes, and a slow rate continuous saline infusion is run. I've actually never seen or heard of an institution doing this, but obviously my exposure is limited to the hospitals I've trained and worked at. So I'm actually really curious to know if this is routine at other institutions. And if you've seen it before, feel free to send me an email or leave a comment on any of my social media because I would love to learn about this. Lastly, I'm adding membrane stripping into the cervical ripening section, even though technically it's a method of induction, because technically this can be performed anytime so long as their cervix is dilated enough for you to perform that. I would say most commonly you're going to see the use of misoprostol, dinoprostone, and balloon catheters. A common clinical scenario would look like this. A patient comes in with a closed cervix. Every 4 hours, they receive vaginal Cytotec until their cervix opens up to fingertip to 1 centimeter dilation. Some patients only need 1 or 2 doses to get there, while others need 4 to 5. Then we strip their membranes and place a Foley or Cook balloon with or without Cytotec at the same time. Eventually, the balloon falls out on its own or comes out easily when we tug on the tail. Most balloons have an inflation capacity of about 80 cc's, so after the balloon falls out, the cervix should be dilated to about 3 to 4 centimeters. Now we can move on to phase 2, the induction phase. How do we induce labor once the cervix is favorable? Again, we have medical and mechanical options. The primary medication we use for induction of labor is oxytocin, or brand name Pitocin in the United States, and this acts on the uterus to stimulate contractions. It's administered as a continuous IV infusion started at a low dose and generally titrated every 30 minutes, usually to achieve a goal of 5 contractions in 10 minutes or contraction adequacy if an intrauterine pressure catheter is in place. This is typically continued until the patient delivers. The primary mechanical intervention is amniotomy, which is the medical term for breaking the bag of water. There are no real rules about when you should or should not break the bag of water. The American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology published a systematic review looking at outcomes in patients with early versus late amniotomy versus spontaneous rupture of membranes and found no increased risk for cesarean delivery with early amniotomy. In fact, the study found that early amniotomy shortens the duration of labor, although these were in patients with favorable cervices. The second mechanical intervention is nipple stimulation. I would say this isn't routine practice in the hospital setting unless a patient strongly desires to do so. At least that's been my experience. Although, fun fact, I once had a patient who had a medical indication for induction but was declining any medical or mechanical interventions, and she nipple stimmed her way from closed to 4 centimeters. Anyway, the available studies evaluating nipple stimulation for labor induction involved patients with low-risk pregnancies only, and since we have other methods with better safety and efficacy data, we tend to stick with those. Also, a lot of patients are being induced for medical indications that take them out of the low-risk category that has been studied. All right, let's go through a couple of hypothetical induction scenarios. There's a G1 P0 who is being induced for preeclampsia without severe features. She presents with a closed cervix. She receives 4 vaginal Cytotec, makes it to 1 centimeter. At that point, her membranes are stripped and a Cook catheter is placed. She's already contracting 5 times in 10 minutes, so no other medications are used while the balloon is in place. The balloon falls out, and her subsequent exam shows that she is 450 minus 3, soft and mid position, calculating a Bishop score of 6. Pitocin is started, amniotomy is performed. She continues on the Pitocin and delivers. Next case. This is a G4 P3003 being induced for advanced maternal age. On initial exam, she is 250 minus 3. A Foley balloon is placed with a vaginal Cytotec. The balloon falls out after 2 hours, and she is 350 minus 3, medium mid position, calculating a Bishop score of 5. She receives another vaginal Cytotec 4 hours after the last one, and the subsequent check shows a Bishop score of 7. Pitocin is started, her bag of water breaks spontaneously, and she delivers shortly after. As an anecdotal side note from personal experience, I would say providers tend to be a little less strict about the Bishop score prior to Pitocin and amniotomy in multiparous patients. And this is typically because once their cervix is soft and even just a little bit dilated, the combination of pit and amniotomy tends to kick labor into gear very quickly compared with primes. In my experience, multips are just much less likely to experience prolonged labor or failed induction of labor. Scenario number 3 is a G2 P0101 being induced electively at term. Initially, she is fingertip thick and high. A cervidil is placed and left in situ for 12 hours. On the next check, she is 1.5 20 minus 3. A Cook balloon is placed and she receives an oral cytotec. The balloon falls out and her Bishop score is 6. She's contracting 4 in 10. Amniotomy is performed and she continues to contract 4 to 5 in 10, but eventually her contractions space out to 2 to 3 in 10. So Pitocin is started and eventually she delivers. All right, that brings us to the end of induction of labor basics. To review, there are many indications for labor induction, and the ACOG Practice Bulletin number 831 is a great place for you to learn what some of those indications are. You can think of induction as having 2 phases. Phase 1 is the cervical ripening phase, and methods for doing so include the administration of synthetic prostaglandins like misoprostol and dinoprostone, or the use of mechanical methods such as the Foley balloon, Cook catheter, laminaria, or Dilapan. When the patient's cervix dilates, you can also strip their membranes. Phase 2 is the actual induction phase, and methods for doing so include the administration of oxytocin and performing amniotomy. Nipple stimulation is an option as well, although is less commonly utilized. As a reminder, if you're interested in getting your hands on the OBGYN Residency Starter Pack, the 5-step guide for incoming interns, feel free to check the link in the show notes. Take care, and I'll catch up with you next Saturday.